Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán says the EU is 1 inch away from reaching an agreement on its massive €1.8 trillion budget. The breakthrough follows a German-brokered compromise just ahead of the EU Leaders Summit taking place in Brussels. Hungary has claimed the breaking of the deadlock as a victory, but questions still have to be answered about whether the proposed deal is lawful. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte says he plans to seek legal advice looking at possible violations of an agreement previously reached between member states and the European Parliament. The budget has been held up for weeks as Hungary, along with Poland, exercised their veto over funds being tied to the rule of law mechanism. It allows for money to be withheld from countries that break EU laws.
So I think negotiation today will be an important one. The preparation was quite a long one, 4 weeks to negotiate, and we are just 1 inch from reaching a consensus. So I have an opinion that we are very, very close to reach a good agreement for the unity of the European Union. So today we are fighting for the unity of our common continent.
Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is standing by for us in Brussels. Good evening to you, Darren. Viktor Orbán there, sounding very happy indeed, but that's not necessarily a view shared across Brussels.
No, not indeed, but I think there is an element at least of relief here in Oliver that they are close to a deal, not least of all because these talks have clearly been carrying on for weeks and weeks. At one stage, it really did look like it might not be possible to get agreement, and that would have meant that the Coronavirus Recovery Fund, with some €750 billion and that over €1 trillion budget for the next 7 years, would not have gone ahead. And clearly people, businesses, frankly, countries are pretty desperate for that money to try and help those that need it most and to kickstart their economies in the months to come, as hopefully we start to see light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to the pandemic. But ultimately, there are reservations about this. On the one hand, you've clearly got Viktor Orbán there, who's pretty happy what he sees as a solution, though it must be noted the mechanism itself does pretty much stay in place. He wanted it removed after all. But, you know, for people who are quite critical potentially of this new arrangement, it is not going to be done in kind of retrospect. So it's not going to look back at issues that may well have happened in the past. It only applies to the budget, not to the Coronavirus Recovery Fund itself. It'll have to be taken to the European Court of Justice to be tested, first of all, to see whether the mechanism is legal or not. And there are concerns about that. There are concerns that the court itself might judge that it isn't. And then, after all of that, even if member states decide to take this mechanism and to use it against a member state, be it Hungary, Poland, or indeed anyone else, the member state then also gets to take it to the European Court of Justice to challenge that decision about whether it should proceed. So there are lots of ifs and buts and maybes in this process, and that's why people are concerned that, you know what, it really won't be very effective at the end of the day, that it will not change the course when it comes to the issue of the rule of law that we've seen over the last couple of years in particularly Poland and Hungary. Well, Oliver, had a chance to speak to Petri SARVAMAA. He is a Finnish MEP, and I began by asking him whether he was a happy man with this compromise.
I am a happy man, and let me explain why. You know, contrary to a lot of initial reactions, when you really look at the text in the declaration, it changes absolutely nothing. And the little delay that it gives in the form of you know, the appeal to the Court of Justice of the European Union is actually something that would be there regardless of what they say in this declaration of the European Council.
But my understanding is also that the ECJ is going to rule on the validity of the mechanism itself, and that there's a possibility that they might not do so. They might reject it.
Well, no, but I mean, let's assume that either Poland or Hungary will appeal the legality of the regulation on the conditionality of the rule of law on the budget. So and they have to do that within 2 months, then unofficially we know already that the Court of Justice would prioritize this case, and I'm pretty confident that we are not talking about years, but rather months.
Yeah, but from my understanding of what the mechanism is, because that's not going to change, or what it's going to target, it's not really that broad sweeping anyway. It's not going to look at things like the freedom of the media or, judicial independence. It's very much focused on the fraudulent use of EU money. So the mechanism itself is, it's not a great breakthrough on this issue of the rule of law, is it?
No, hang on, but that's another thing. Now we are talking about, what tools does the regulation have in the first place, and there I would say all those who are critical towards this compromise and this overall deal is this: think if we had started, on what I would say wrong foot, which is try to legislate something very vaguely.
The wider point, I suppose, is that the criticism of Poland and Hungary is on things like, political groupings, on the media, on the judiciary.
Right.
And from what I understand is this mechanism probably won't change that.
No, but I mean, honestly, it is a little bit longer story than that. I mean, I understand this frustration. I am frustrated myself.
So is this just a start? Is this just a start, essentially? Then this is kind of the first brick on a much longer path.
This is exactly that, and let's assume that we would have failed on this, and the German presidency would not have been able to deliver the result would have been most probably that we would still have the rule of law regulation, because that could be done separately. It only takes a qualified majority in the council. It takes a simple majority in the parliament. It's a co-decision legislation that we already negotiated. So we would have the rule of law, but we would not have MFF as of January 1st. We would not have the recovery, and so on and so forth. So, but this is exactly what you said. This is like, someone on a computer game has to, clear all the hurdles to get to the next level. And this is what we are doing here.
Darren, the budget battle is a huge part of this EU Council, but EU leaders have got plenty of other things that they want to discuss. What else is on the agenda?
Yeah, indeed, a whole range of things. And we have to remember this is the first time they've met in person, really, since October. It was felt that it was necessary to do so, given the complex range of topics. They include, for example, possible sanctions against Turkey. Now, that's unlikely. This is all based on the tensions that we're seeing in the Eastern Mediterranean. I don't think we're going to get that far, but there is a feeling, clearly from Greece and Cyprus, that the EU needs to take a harder line against Ankara. In addition to that, we've had the coronavirus pandemic, unsurprisingly talked about today. This idea of a health union, it's something the EU Commission and some member states are trying to push, that the EU needs to cooperate much more when it comes to health, which up until now has pretty much remained as a competency of member states themselves. Brussels had very little to do with that. People want that to change, Oliver. In addition to all of that, there's going to be a briefing by Ursula von der Leyen tonight on Brexit, but that will almost certainly be a repeat of what we heard last night. And there is this focus on the environment and the Green Deal, because the EU is still committed to getting carbon emissions down by 55%. Whole range of strategies and money being chucked at that to try and ensure the EU meets that target. And finally, over dinner tonight as well, Oliver, they're going to talk about EU-US relations, which are going to take a pretty big turn, I would suggest, with the Joe Biden presidency due to start next month, and maybe even potentially an invitation to President-elect Biden to come and visit Brussels at some stage next year.
Darren McCaffrey joining us there from Brussels. Thank you.